Welcome to the Mamatoosa podcast. I'm your host, Atoosa Benji. Welcome. Today's the birthday of my podcast, my sweet baby. It's been a long time coming, and it's truly a dream come true. And like many dreams, I already pictured myself doing it, and then I had the doubts of whether I would be ready to do it, if I would be good at it. And much like motherhood, are we actually ever fully ready? So here we go, putting aside perfectionism and judgment and all the how it should be's and how it could be's. Let's birth this baby. I'm a wife and a mother and a grandma. I'm also a midwife and an educator. And my passion is hearing women's stories, the stories of resilience, the stories of the bonds that bring us together, the journey, the hardship, the laughter, and the tears. So welcome to it all. I'm so excited to be here with you. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the journey of this podcast. I was born in Iran, and I left Iran when I was 5. My mother was 8 months pregnant, and we upped and moved to the UK. But the story of this podcast coming together is because when I was a little girl, I went to the hospital to visit my dad. He had just had surgery. And the first time I laid eyes on a nurse, they had me at hello. I loved their uniform, their hat, their cape, and an upside down watch. And I was enthralled with that upside down watch. And that's what they lifted, and it went right side up, obviously. And they counted pulse and respirations. They gave injections to people, and they took care of people, and they healed people. So on the weekend, I would line up my dolls and have my own infirmary. And I would take care of a room full of dollies. They got measured and weighed. They got their shots. They got their medication. And I was a nurse through and through. Somehow, as the years went on, the passion sort of stayed, but I forgot about it completely, I think, going into high school. And by the time I was in college, I got pulled into journalism. I started taking journalism classes, and I would watch Oprah and I would watch Barbara Walters, and I wanted to be them. I wanted to sit on a couch and sip hot tea and delve into the lives of people and listen to their stories. I wrote for the college paper. I edited the college paper, and I then went into some broadcast journalism. I worked for a local cable company, and ironically, I decided that journalism would probably take me away from home too much. I had just gotten married. I was young, and we were starting our lives, and I thought, wow, journalism probably pulls you away from your life a lot when you're trying to raise children and have a happy home, and probably I don't want to be a journalist. I pulled away from journalism. We decided to have our first child, and my birth was traumatic. It was not a difficult birth when you looked at it on paper. I was healthy. I had absolutely no complications. My pregnancy was seamless. My birth was fast and furious. And in the birth world, we often say that you birth like you live. I live pretty fast and furious. I get it done. I complain all the way through, but I get it done. And that's exactly how I labored. 6 hours first baby from start to finish. And it was really, really difficult. The hardest part of my birth was that when my baby was ready to be born, the doctor was not in the room. And unfortunately, the nurse put her hand on top of the baby's head and said, "You are not allowed to push. There is no doctor in this room," and held the baby inside of me with for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, until I was unable to hold the baby in, and the baby was born perfectly healthy, but the mom was no longer healthy. I completely was traumatized at that moment and lost my empowerment, which then led into breastfeeding issues and postpartum mood disorder, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time I had my second baby, which was now 5.5 years later, I did a lot of reading, and I wanted to know why I had so much trouble breastfeeding. Why was my postpartum period so sad? And there were many reasons, but one of them said people who have an unmedicated birth are much more likely to have easier breastfeeding. And I thought, well, I had an unmedicated birth, but I felt completely disempowered. And how do I become empowered? Well, the book said hire a doula. This was 1998. I had no idea what a doula was. I had never heard of the word, but I looked in the back of a magazine and there were the names of two doulas back there. And I called one, Cheryl Baker, shout out. She came to the door and she said she'd been doing this for 20 years and I hired her. I asked very few questions. My second birth looked very much like my first birth, again on paper, fast and furious, 5 hours from beginning to end. But my experience was completely different because Cheryl had taught me how to advocate for myself so that if I needed to push out my baby, when I needed to push out my baby, no one was going to hold that baby inside of me and cause the trauma that had been caused the first time. So lo and behold, that's what happened. I needed to push. There was no doctor in the room. We had already told the nurse about my first experience. She said, "Oh, love, that's not going to happen. Don't worry." And guess what happened? I needed to push. And my nurse said, "Don't worry. I got you. Push out your baby." And my baby came into these loving hands in a dim room, no table broken. I don't even think she was wearing gloves. We got as close to a home birth as possible. And that was the moment that I changed. I changed from fear to empowerment, and I changed from being silenced to having a voice, which really changed my motherhood journey. So by the time I had my third child, I hired my doula again, same doula, and had a different birth, but still a very empowered birth, which we'll talk about on other episodes. By the time my third baby was born, I was ready to start supporting other people and having babies. I was so moved by what my doula had done for me and so inspired by the work of helping people transition into motherhood that I had to start doing it. So fast and furious as I do, I became a childbirth educator. I became a certified doula, and I also became a lactation educator. I started attending births. I started teaching classes. I started seeing people at home for lactation education. And I was really brought back to my love for nursing, for taking care of people. Perhaps it wasn't with the cape and the upside down watch, but that's where my birthwork career began. I had a very busy doula practice, practicing in West Los Angeles for a couple of decades, and I decided to go back to school to become a midwife. I'm now a licensed midwife. I practice all over Los Angeles. I have my own practice. I help other midwives in their practices. I train doulas. I still teach, and education is my passion. I have one foot in the classroom and one foot by the bedside. So the irony of this whole thing is that while I work with mothers day in and day out, I actually wasn't raised for very long by my mother. My mother died very suddenly and very tragically when I was 13, and I was raised by my grandmother and a group of women who stepped up and helped raise me. My grandma was everything. My mother's mother was who I spent a lot of time with, and together she showed me everything birth. Everything that was birth related, she would call me and say, "Turn on the TV, channel 7, there's a lion giving birth." And I would go on, and together we would be in awe of this happening. Or come look outside, there's a mother bird feeding its little chicks. Or look at that pregnant woman, imagine a whole human comes out of that person. Nature, she always used to say, nature is immaculate and amazing. And my grandma really brought the love of birth into my life. You will see that I equate everything with birth. Every analogy I use is birth related, woman related, stage of birth related, and nothing will be different with this podcast. So humor me for one moment as I tell you about the journey of the labor of this podcast, because today is the birth. The early labor was exciting, as early labor is, anticipatory. I'm going to do this. I'm doing this. I think I'm having contractions. I think I'm having ideas. I think I'm having speakers. I think I'm ready for interviews. And just this excitement of early labor that we have when our labors begin. And My pregnancy for this podcast took about 2.5 years. So I've been pregnant for a very, very long time, listeners. And as I got into the active labor, which the emotional signpost for active labor is seriousness, I got down to business. I started talking to people. I started doing some research. I started scheduling interviews. I bought my equipment. We were in it. I was stopping to take deep breaths. Jokes weren't super funny anymore. I was in my active labor phase. And my active labor took a good year, I would say. And then I went into transition. And those of us who know the stages of labor, transition is that period where the body is getting ready to push. It hasn't quite gotten to 10 centimeters yet to get ready to push out the baby. And transition comes with doubt. Can I do this? I'm not strong enough. I can't do this. I need to leave. I need to stop the project. This is too scary. Am I ready for this? I want to run. And sometimes with unmedicated natural labor, you will literally see a mother get up and say, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm leaving. And that tells us that the baby is coming. So I went through the transition period, and after a few hours of hard, strong pushes, my baby is here. So why the name Mamatoosa? In my mother tongue Farsi, Mama is one of the words we use for midwife, and Atoosa is my name. So Mamatoosa, midwife Atoosa. I just want to give a quick shout out to my friend Nikki and my dear friend Mama V, who have always called me Mamatoosa even since before I was a midwife. So there was a little bit of divinity giving me the premonition that perhaps this Mamatoosa podcast baby was on its way. So what's this podcast about? It's about resilience. It's about womanhood. It's about motherhood. It's about girlhood. It's about stories that bring us together, topics that are taboo, about women, about sexuality. We will touch on birth, we will touch on death, and we will touch on everything in between. So let's get ready to laugh, to cry, to get uncomfortable, to feel deeply connected. Let's celebrate this life. Welcome to the Mamatoosa podcast. Thanks for listening to the Mamatoosa podcast on the Industry Plant Podcast Network. Mamatoosa is hosted by me, Atoosa Benji, and produced by Josh Stretton Carlson. Chris Agnew is our audio editor, and our theme music is composed by Mary Lalazarian. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing. See you next Tuesday.